My name is Osvaldo Vasquez. This is a short documentary on my reflective project. My reflective project question is the way violence is depicted in digital media ethical? Violence has always been around, including physical, sexual, emotional, psychological, and many more. With the increasing popularity of digital media, people have found ways to show violence through audio, video, and photos. This question has become a controversial topic worldwide. There is no right answer, however, there is two sides to this, becoming a pro or con argument. Pro meaning that it is alright to expose violence through digital media, or con meaning that violence should be censored. Now, you may ask yourself, where do we see, hear, or read about violence in digital media? Well, we see it in the news, TV shows, movies, social networks, and video games. We also hear it on the radio and we read about it in the newspaper. We will discuss about both sides of the argument, starting with the pros following the cons. Pro has the following arguments why violence should be exposed through digital media. We are well informed about violence around us, provide statistics of violence and death rates. It is reality, therefore it shouldn't be covered up. Provides valuable information to be aware of. We learn the consequences from these cruel actions. It helps communities and groups to raise awareness. Now we proceed on to the con side. These are some of the arguments. There should be age restriction on the violence that is shown. Depicting violence can desensitize people. Enforce and warn about violent content, viewer discretion, and graphic content. Children should not be exposed to violence. People may become fearful of their environment, more likely to behave in an aggressive or harmful way. Now, we will see two clips about violence. The first video supports the pro side, and the second video supports the con side. This is a short clip from ABC News, 52 shot in violent Chicago weekend.
We're going to take you now to Chicago, where this past weekend at least 52 people were shot, 8 of them killed in a wave of violence across the city. What is going on there? Here's Chris Bury.
The mayhem at this housing project made no more sense than any of the other shootings. A Father's Day party boiled over. 5 shot, including a 1-year-old girl. Gunned down in a weekend of violence so typical it didn't even make the front pages.
They're waging war in the streets of Chicago, and we're losing children every single day.
Most of the shootings took place in poor neighborhoods, far from downtown and tourist attractions. One reason much of the city seems to be shrugging its shoulders.
I think people just say, oh, it's a bunch of gangbangers shooting at each other. Unfortunately, though, often a lot of innocent people get caught in the crossfire.
The losses are staggering. Today, this family learned that their 17-year-old was found shot to death just this morning.
I mean, this is crazy. I mean, they didn't have to kill my son.
A dozen gunshot victims came here to Stroger Hospital. One died, others are hanging on.
We had a young girl come in that was shot in the back and will probably be paralyzed
For the rest of
her life.
The shootings now commonplace in a city where gangs are powerful, guns plentiful. Beyond the guns and the gangs, the city is coping with a street culture in which all too often the silliest squabbles lead to deadly force.
I think people have just grown up thinking that, you know, if I'm mad at you, I'm going to grab my gun and shoot you.
So 52 shot, 8 dead in only 3 days, and the city seems all but numb to an epidemic of violence. Chris Bury, ABC News.
Now the second short clip from Child Mind Institute, Dr. John Constantino, Social Media, Violent Imagery, and Technology's Effect on At-Risk Kids.
Well, recent technology, I think there's at least a couple of ways that plays badly into the situation for a child who's prone to violence or who's really at risk for that. First of all, the access to imagery and themes that are related to violence are ubiquitous and getting more and more easy for children to access, even with familial or parental prohibitions, that they are so easy to get a hold of and spend time with that they fuel the fire in certain ways of these kind of violent preoccupations. It's not really known to what extent, for example, overindulgence in violent video games or things like that have a major causal role in the development of violent acts, particularly of serious aggressive acts. But they certainly aren't helping any. And the idea is that if a child is really, if the task for a child is really to move away from that kind of preoccupation, and yet everywhere in their environment there is the draw of this kind of exposure, then it really derails opportunities to move kids' thinking to a different realm. So that's one aspect of this. Another aspect of it is really communication and social kind of networking, and ways in which children can both connect with other people on the positive side, but also be tortured or bullied or to have their own negative evaluations of themselves or others reified by sort of rapid, not well thought out communications that happen over the medium of social media, over the context of social media, that again, the child can in some ways become his or her own worst enemy without even knowing it. That beginning to communicate about these issues and about these preoccupations, accruing the responses of others who are like-minded and that are really more destructive than constructive in their interaction is really a liability for children.
Now that we have covered some of the pros and cons, which side is more reasonable? The answer is both. It all depends on your point of view on society. Pro side not only helps us become more aware of violence happening in our local community, but global awareness. It is a good thing because we are well informed. However, the con side says that there should be an age restriction and an overall restriction on the content that is shown. Because people are exposed to this violence, their actions are affected. This ethical question mainly affects the community as a whole, because violence in digital media is a reflection of what goes on in our surroundings. Some of the things that are a good outcome of the two sides is that both pro and con affect the community in a positive way. Pro helps everyone, not only in the local communities, but global communities, to come together to raise awareness and have protests. Con helps the community because with less violence being exposed to the environment, communities can become more peaceful and safe. This ethical question also has a big part on how our culture is affected. This being said, how does violence shown in digital media have an effect on an individual's culture? Pro side helps people know the reality of what is happening. This helps cultures unite to be able to get through the crisis together. However, con side helps to eliminate stereotypes of certain racial or cultural groups. Because of the wide variety of ways to be connected to news sources, everyone can know what is happening around the world and connect with people. This ethical question mainly affects the community as a whole, because violence in digital media is a reflection of what goes on in our surroundings. Some of the things that are a good outcome of the two sides is that both pro and con affect the community in a positive way. Pro helps everyone, not only in the local communities, but global communities, to come together to raise awareness and have protests. Con helps the community